Hello everybody, welcome back to the Farming Simulator 25 tips and tricks video. Today we're going to be continuing our march through all of the various crops in Farm Sim 25 by taking a look at potatoes. Now potatoes have some interesting gameplay dynamics that we haven't seen in other crops to this point. And before we dive into that, let's go ahead and take a look at our Farm Sim Academy infographic from the FarmingSimulator.com website. Now, a lot of this information pertains to Farming Simulator 22 specifically, but we have seen a lot of this information on other crops follow forward to Farm Sim 25 fairly well. From our infographic, we know that we're going to see an average yield of 41,300 liters per hectare. And in previous crops, this yield has been assuming zero bonus. So if we have, let's say, a 95% yield bonus on our field, we can expect approximately 95% more than what we see listed here as our yield. We have an average selling price on Easy Economy of $516 per 1,000 liters. It also says we're going to use 3,800 liters worth of seed. And again, the reason this seed is so high is because we're not actually using seed per se, we're using seed potatoes. And potatoes are fairly large, and therefore when we are measuring by liter, well, therefore we're going to use a whole lot of liters with respect to our potato usage. Potatoes have an average growing duration of 5 months. We're going to be planting them in the March to April timeframe, and we're going to be able to harvest them sometime between August and September. Now, if we pulled up our crop calendar, we can go ahead and confirm March and April as far as our planting, and August and September as far as our harvest schedule. If you play with the crop calendar disabled, you're still going to have 5 months from planting to harvest. There's no way around that. We take a look at our prices screen. We have our potatoes here, and this particular save does have the Easy Economy enabled. So we see an average high of $750, an average low of $600 per 1,000 liters. Now, this pricing is a little bit higher than the average price that we saw on that infographic. As far as where you're going to be able to sell your potatoes, we're going to be able to sell them here at the Farmers Market, the Goldcrest Valley Train Sell Point, Grain Barge Terminal 1 and 2, Grain River Silo, as well as if the map has a potato processor or a soup factory, potatoes are going to be accepted there as well. Now, with respect to what can you make with potatoes? Well, since we have the potato processor, we're going to be able to make potato chips. And we will also need the oil mill in order to make oil for those potato chips. But as far as potato chips go, we have an average high selling price of $4,548 per 1,000 liters and an average low of $4,467, again, per 1,000 liters. With respect to our potato soup, well, we have an average high of $3,765 per 1,000 liters and an average low of $3,714 per 1,000 liters. Now, you're also going to be able to use potatoes as a root crop with respect to feeding your pigs. Now, let's take a look at some of the machinery that we're going to need to use with respect to our potatoes. In Farm Sim 22's premium expansion, Giants introduced several vegetable planters, vegetable harvesters, and the 3 new crops of carrots, parsnips, and red beets. Why I bring that up is because they also introduced the GF400 and the GF800. These are ridgers or hillers, and what they do is they create a ridge in the field, and then with respect to planting our carrots, parsnips, and red beets, we're going to have to plant within that ridge soil. But something that Giants did with respect to potatoes with the premium expansion is that they also gave potatoes a yield boost if we planted them in a field that was already ridged. So we are going to be testing that in today's video by using the GF800 to ridge some of our field before planting. Now, specific to planting, well, we're going to need to come to root crops and potato planters. And from here, we have 3 options. We have the GL420, which is 3 meters wide. We have the Prois the Prius 440, which is also 3 meters wide, but appears to be trailed. And then we have the GL 860s Compacta. This is what we're going to be using in this video because it is 6 meters wide. It will accept potatoes or seed, and it's used specifically for planting potatoes. Now, once the potatoes are ready to harvest, we're going to need to use a potato harvester. And here we have either the Keeler 2 RK22. Personally, I would avoid this like the plague because it is extremely slow with respect to harvesting. Then we have the Evo 290. We are going to be demonstrating a little bit of harvest with this. This is also a trailed harvester at $205,000. But the pinnacle of potato harvesting is going to be the Ventor 4150. This $599,000 monster is going to be a self-propelled potato harvesting beast. It's going to hold 22,500 liters worth of potatoes, weighs 30 tons, and again, it's going to cost $599,000. Now, remember I mentioned that potatoes, well, you typically plant potatoes with potatoes. You're going to find those under Potato Technologies, under Consumables. We can buy pallets of potatoes, 1,000 liters apiece, for $950 each. Let's come on over here and check out some of our machinery. Here we have 4 pallets worth of potatoes, because according to our infographic, well, it should take 3,800 liters of potatoes to plant our approximately 1 hectare field. Here we have the Grimmy potato planter. It is currently folded up, so we'll have to unfold it before we use it. But let's also talk about some of the other ways that we can handle our potatoes, either during harvest or post-harvest. And that is with the use of this particular auger wagon. So if we come up here to trailers and then auger wagons, we have several different auger wagons, and most of these will not allow the use of potatoes. But the KUW 2000 is one that will. In fact, this one will work with all of our root crops, including potatoes, sugar beets, carrots, parsnips, and red beets. This particular auger wagon is interesting because it uses belts to both empty from the trailer and then transfer it over to another trailer or whatever. We also have a few others. We have then the Amity Crop Chaser. This one is actually going to work with any crop, including our potatoes. This one's going to hold 60,900 liters worth of product. It's $160,000 and it's fairly heavy. It's going to require a fairly heavy tractor also to pull this, especially when loaded. That's why it has a horsepower requirement of $450. Now, other ways you can handle potatoes is typically you're going to be storing them in heaps, which means that you're going to be dumping them on the ground, either just outside or in a building. So when it comes time to load those back up, you might want to make use of a belt system. So here we have the Lizard S710. This belt is going to be used to pick potatoes up off the ground and place them on one of the 2 other conveyor belts with a TC816. This belt is going to be used to basically transport things horizontally from one location to the next. And then we have the SL8022 Quantum. This particular belt will be used to offload into a trailer or something else because it can be adjusted up as well as extended out. The RH2460 is a rather unique conveyor belt because it is used to dump product into. You see it has a capacity of 13,000 liters. And then we can enable pallet creation and we can make crates of potatoes in 1,000 liter quantities. So that would allow us to store potatoes in the form of crates, which we could then later use as seed potatoes for the coming year, or we could feed our potatoes to our pigs in this way as opposed to using a bucket and having just a pile of potatoes stored somewhere, because typically we cannot put our potatoes into a silo like we can our traditional grain crops. So here we have that HAWE auger wagon. We have our quantum belt and our lizard belt located right here. And then we have the Grimmy RH2460 belt that is again going to be used in order to create pallets. Now, as far as productions, I've kind of already alluded to it, but we have a couple different productions that we can use with respect to our potatoes. So if we come here to our factory screen, we're going to scroll down and find our potato processor, $360,000. And this will accept canola oil, sunflower oil, or olive oil, as well as potatoes, and produce potato chips as an output. Then we also have the soup factory. The soup factory is going to be $405,000, and it's going to accept red beets, carrots, parsnips, and potatoes, and it's going to be able to create potato soup specifically for potatoes, or if you just so happen to have all four of those crops, you can make an all root crop soup that will combine all four of those inputs into a single soup. Now, once you have created your final product with your potatoes, if you should desire to process them further as opposed to simply selling them, we're going to be able to sell them at various farmers markets scattered around the map, like this small farmers kiosk, this larger farmers kiosk, or the farmers market. And I've simply placed a farmers market here just to make it a little bit easier when we come time to sell our products. So with that said, let's go ahead and prepare some of our test field here by ridging it. So we are using field 41 here on Riverbend Springs. And the reason we're using this field is it is approximately 1 hectare in size. So if we come here to our farmland screen, we're going to click on field 41. You see it is 1.18 hectare in size. It's going to cost $70,848. And this is just slightly smaller than 1.18 hectares because we do have a little bit of land here at the top between the field and the road and between the field and the fence. And then we have a little bit of grass on either side of the field. Something else that you will notice up here at the top of the field is we have a beehive. And that is because potatoes are going to get a 2.5% bonus when you have a beehive close to the field. So that is something that we're also going to be checking with respect to our potatoes. And it looks like I've placed this backwards. So let me go and change this around. And then, like I said, we're gonna ridge part of this field, and then the other part of this field we're not going to ridge because I do want to do a little mini test within our test today to see if we get more potatoes off a ridged area than a non-ridged area. Now, for our ridger, I really do recommend that you have a fairly big front weight on your tractor because this thing is awful heavy. If you don't have a front weight, you might find that your tractor is light in the front, which will make it kind of difficult to steer around. So the way this works is you're going to have a field that is already prepared, as we have right here. So it is been plowed, it's been limed if it needed plowing and liming. We've gone ahead and cultivated the field, fertilized it, and such. We're going to turn the unit on, and off we go to the races. Now let's just back up here and check and see how this looks. So here we have our soil kind of ridged, and that is how we're going to prepare our soil for our carrots, parsnips, and red beets. But I also want to see if we also get a bonus with respect to our potatoes, because we did back in the FS22 premium expansion when they introduced this gameplay functionality. Now, just so that I don't affect the overall yield of the entire field, I'm only going to ridge a few rows. I was initially thinking that I would do half the field and then half the field without, but then I thought that might affect the results too much, and we really wouldn't know if the bees were really a 2.5% bonus. If we might get up to a 2.5% bonus off of our ridging here. So I'm probably only going to do 1 or 2 passes with this, and then we'll be able to compare a pass that's ridged and a pass that's not ridged. So as far as filling our seeder, we're just going to connect to it. We're going to pull up to our pallets of potatoes, and we're going to hit R. And we can see now that our pallet is going down as far as fill level, and we're putting our potatoes in our planter. And then one more. So this will give us 4,000 liters worth of potatoes. And something that is important to note is technically, and I haven't really demonstrated this in other videos, technically you can unload most seeders or planters. You cannot do that with your potatoes. So if you are planting potatoes, it's going to be a pretty good idea to put just as many potatoes in the planter as you need, because you cannot take potatoes out once you put them in. The reason that's important is, well, of course, unlike seed, you can use potatoes in other ways. So I'm going to go ahead and hit X to unfold our planter here, right? So if you have a seeder or a planter here that is full of potatoes, you can't use it in any other way, right? So you are somewhat incentivized, I would say, to use only as much as you need, because we can't empty, that's what I'm trying to say, the potato planter once we do it. All right, so we're going to do 3 headlands. That's what I wanted to do. That's all fine. There we go. I'll lock this thing in, and you can see I did 2 passes with our ridger. It was 8 meters wide. Our planter is 8 meters wide, so we know that we have 12 meters worth of ridged soil. Then the rest of the field isn't. Now we're going to lower it down. We don't need to turn this on because it is basically just operated through friction. And as we drive forward, we are now planting our potatoes. So if we jump out of the field here, out of the tractor, and over here, we now see that we have potatoes. We're growing. We have a yield bonus of plus 95%. Excellent. And when I get to the end of this row, I'm going to go and plant the other side over there. And you should be able to see that our planter is going to ridge the soil by itself. We don't have to pre-ridge the soil. Again, I'm just doing this to test to see if Giants has carried forward the yield bonus that we did have with respect to potatoes after the premium expansion dropped for Farm Sim 22. So as I said, you can see now that the planter itself is ridging the soil. You can see our potatoes going down quite a bit. In fact, we've already used 500 liters worth of seed in just making 1.5 passes. So we'll be interested to see how accurate that 3,800 liters of seed per hectare turns out to truly be. I'm going to go ahead and finish planting. I'm going to keep track of how much potatoes we add, if we have to add any to the planter in order to finish out this field, and I'll be back with you in a little bit. So now that we have planted our potatoes, we have 384 liters left. So we came close to using our 3,800 liters per hectare. We used 3,616. So I would use that information with respect to trying to figure out how much seed potatoes you need on your field when you go to planting, because again, you can't unload the potato planter. So the potatoes that are in here are stuck in here until we use them up some other way. Welcome to April. You can see we have our first grow state. And if we are going to see a yield bonus from ridging our field first, it's not apparent by looking in the information box down in the lower right corner, because here it says plus 95%. And if we go all the way over here, well beyond where we didn't ridge, it still says plus 95%. So it looks like we will have to run a pass with the harvester both on this side of the field and the other side of the field in order to ultimately establish, do we get a benefit from ridging first? Let me go ahead and fast forward and take a look at the second growth state. Here we are in June with our second growth state on our potatoes. Everything looks just a little bit bigger. Now hopefully come August, we should see our potatoes flowering. Well, as it turns out, we didn't have to wait. There we are, July. We have our flowering potato plants. Everything looks good. Hopefully our bees are doing what they need to do in order to get us a little bit of a bonus as well. Okay, August is here and it's time to harvest our potatoes. Unlike traditional crops, most root crops come up with a foliage state of remove foliage when they are ready to harvest. So if we take a look here at our growth tab, you can see that we have remove foliage on our field as opposed to the typical ready to harvest state. So with that, let's go ahead and, well, let's try out our little harvester first. So let's grab our Dutes tractor here. And this unit is trailed, and we're going to be offset a little bit. So we connect to it. We're going to unfold it by hitting X. And now we go. So let's get lined up. We're going to drop it down. We're going to turn it on. And off we go. So you can see how this is working. We're basically collecting 2 rows at a time. While we see 3 rows disappearing here, we are really only collecting 2 rows worth of potatoes. And it is going into our hopper here in front as it makes its way through all the various bits and bobs of the harvester. And obviously harvesting 2 rows at a time will be quite time consuming. And the way we need to harvest this is basically we need to run out the perimeter of the field. Because we don't want to cause crop destruction. So let's go ahead and just kind of table this harvester. We would hit O to pipe out. And that's going to raise that up. And then we'd bring a trailer underneath there to unload it. I'm just going to go ahead and unload into this trailer. O to drop that back down, X to fold it back up. And let's go ahead and take a look at our larger harvester. That's what we're going to use for the rest of this test. So we need X to unfold this thing. And there's a lot of animations going on here. And now that it's unfolded, let's go ahead and get lined up. I'm going to say okay to that, and we're going to pick a pass that is going to be unaffected by our initial pass. So let's go ahead and drop this down, turn this on, lock this in, and off to the races we go. You can see this is basically picking up 4 rows at a time. See our potatoes and our dirt going into the machine. Dirt's being sifted out of the machine. The potatoes are being cleaned and then ultimately deposited into our waiting hopper. So let's zoom out here a little bit so it's just a little less noisy. And see what we get. Remember, we ridged this soil. So we got 4,000. Nope, we're still counting up. So 4,605 liters. Let's document that down somewhere. So we should expect that we should have 9,210 or thereabout liters worth of potatoes if we go and do the other side. And that would imply that there is no extra yield. So let's go ahead and do that test real fast. I'm going to try to pick a run here that doesn't have hailstorm damage. I'm also trying to adjust this output pipe so we don't have to worry about the utility pole. Alright, that should be pretty good. Lower it down. Off we go. So this is well outside of where we had ridged our soil. So let's see what we get. And don't freak out when you start harvesting and you don't see the fill type going up right away. Remember, this machine has a delay as the potatoes are moving through it. And as a result, when we get to the end of the field, right, it's still adding potatoes to the hopper even when we're done. So it's like we're just going to skirt that storm damage. I think we're getting pretty darn close. There we go. We've done that pass. We're looking for 9,210. We had 9,775. So we have more over here than we have over there. What's up with that? Now, the only thing that I can come up with here is that our bees have a radius. So they had a radius in FS22, but they don't state they have a radius here in FS25. So if they do have a radius, how are we supposed to know? That's my only thought, is because this run is closer to that beehive, that somehow we have a greater bee boost on this run than we did the other. But I think I can clearly state from this information that harvesting or that pre-ridging your field has no benefit. I mean, it would almost imply that it has a detriment, but I wouldn't see that as really being the case. So let's just chalk it up as a fluke. Now I'm going to go ahead and harvest this field, and when we come back, we will have a tabulation as to total yield on our field. Our harvest is now finished, and overall we have a total yield of 80,481 liters. In fact, I've got an overloader full, 24,000 liters there. I have 28,000 liters in both of those trailers, and then I had 481 liters left over, so I went ahead and just put it in the belt over there that will allow us to make pallets. Something else that I've done is I've already added to both of these productions 80,481 liters worth of potatoes. The reason for that is I want to basically compare what we get as far as outputs between the two. I've done the math, but I just want to basically verify that. And then I want to talk a little bit about our potato handling capabilities. So that should be enough in there. And then again, if you recall, we talked about being able to pick these up from a heap. And to some degree, since we cannot store potatoes in a traditional silo, we will be stuck with storing potatoes either in piles on the ground or outside of, either in a building or outside of a building, basically is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to dump some potatoes here and then basically just demonstrate how we would move those potatoes from being piled up into a trailer or something else. Like, for example, this auger wagon. And we've already talked about the belts, being that we have the lizard belt, which is going to pick up from the ground. I have it attached to the other belt, which is designed to raise up and extend. And the way we're going to work this is we're going to enter the belt, and with respect to this big belt, we can left click and go up and down, and we can right click and extend it out quite a bit or shrink it back up, whatever really serves our purpose. I'm going to toggle back over to our smaller belt, and I'm going to turn it on. And you're going to see that this belt is going to pick up from the ground automatically. deposit it onto this larger belt, which is then depositing it into our overloader. Now you may say to yourself, well, why did it stop? Well, it stopped because I have automatic engine start turned off. Here it is. Automatic engine start is turned on. Sorry, I had that backwards. If we turn this off, which means that when we enter a tractor, we have to manually turn the tractor on. And when we leave, it's still running. Right? So what I have to do is enter the small belt, turn it on, and as a result now of turning it on, I can jump out and it will continue to run. So if you are using belts, be sure to turn off automatic engine start. Otherwise, it's just going to require you to be in it the whole time. And what use is that? Now, with respect to this belt, we're going to enter it once again. And we can see we can turn on pallet creation mode by hitting B. So if we do that, it is now going to create a pallet of potatoes, 1,000 liters worth of potatoes. And if we move this pallet out of the way, we'll get another pallet worth of potatoes, and it will just continue that process until this is empty. Now we could also position a belt, for example, this large belt underneath here. Let's go ahead and just demonstrate that. Let's move this thing out of the way. Now I'm going to have a dedicated video on belts later on in the channel, so keep a check on that. Maybe subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. But let's go ahead and position this belt under that belt, right? And now, look, now we can dump into this belt 13,000 liters worth of product, and then we can overload, if you will, into something else, like, for example, a waiting trailer. There you go. Isn't that pretty neat? All right, let's talk about our productions here. With respect to our soup factory, we have a ratio: 300 units of potatoes go in, 75 units worth of potatoes go out. Kind of an interesting mix. Well, basically, this is 25%. So 25% of what we put in is what we're going to get out as far as soup. So if we put 80,481 liters worth of potatoes in, we should expect to get out 20,120 liters worth of potatoes. Okay. Now, with respect to our potato processor, we put 100 units of potatoes in, we get 30 units of potatoes out. Pretty easy math, 30%. But we also need to put 5 units of sunflower oil for each 100 units of potatoes in. So we need to add 5,000 liters worth of sunflower oil, or if we're using canola oil, it's still 5,000 liters for every 100,000 liters worth of potatoes. Oddly enough, if we're using olive oil, it's only 4,000 liters to every 100,000 liters worth of potatoes. Now, we've already done the math, and we've already demonstrated actually in the sunflower video using the potato processor. So I know that if I put 5,000 liters worth of sunflower oil in, I can basically get that much from 1 hectare's worth of sunflowers. I didn't really do the math with respect to canola oil, so I can't really speak to that. You could probably go back and check my canola oil video to see what the total yield was on the canola oil, and then do some math on the oil plant in order to ultimately figure out how much oil you'll get from that 1 hectare. But we do know that we basically get 5,000 liters worth of sunflower oil from that. So we're going to get about 30 bags of potatoes, or 30 pallets worth of potatoes, for every 100,000 liters worth of potatoes. I said that wrong. We're going to get 30,000 liters worth of potatoes for every 100,000 liters worth of potatoes that we put in. If we put in all 80,481 liters worth of potatoes into our potato processor, well, we can expect to get 60,360 potato chips out. Now that comes out to be about 12 pallets. So if we put all 80,481 potatoes into this processor, we should get approximately 24,000 liters worth of potato chips out. So it's going to be 12 pallets, because we also learned from the sunflower video that our potato chip pallets are 2,000 liters each. Now let's take a look here at our prices screen and talk about what we should be seeing with respect to income. Potatoes, 80,481 liters at the best price of $750 per 1,000 liters is going to net us approximate revenue of $60,360. Now, with respect to our potato chips, they're going to have an average high price of $4,548 per 1,000 liters. We're going to get 24,000 liters worth of potato chips out, according to my math. So that's going to equate out to about $109,152 for this 1 hectare's worth of potatoes, in addition to approximately 1 hectare's worth of sunflowers. If we talk about our potato soup, now all we have to do is provide potatoes to get potato soup. So the 80,481 liters worth of potatoes that come in, we should get approximately 20,120 liters of soup out. 20 pallets worth of soup. That's going to net us on a gross revenue of $75,300. Basically $15,000 more than if we had just sold the potatoes themselves. But still a pretty good short from what we would get with respect to our potato chips, but we do have to add sunflower oil, canola oil, or olive oil to our chip plant in order to ultimately get those chips. Now what I want to do next is basically fast forward time and get to a point where we have pallets of our chips, we have pallets of our soup, and then we can sell a pallet of each at our various kiosk points and see what kind of money we actually get. So 2 months have passed and we've now processed all of the potatoes in our soup factory. We did get 20,000 liters worth of potatoes out, but I was incorrect in saying that these were 1,000 liter capacity pallets. They are 2,000 liter capacity pallets, but that won't really affect our pricing that much or our income discussion, because of the fact that I basically priced it out based on 20,000 liters as opposed to 20 pallets. Now let's go ahead and shoot this into our 3 sell points. 8,756. Remember, we have 2,000 liters in here, so it should be about double from our prices screen. 9,222. Or 7,379. So 9,222 times 10. Well, that's going to be $92,220. But we just sold it now. Now is not necessarily the best time for our potato soup. According to this, now is the worst time for our potato soup. But the price we got, $9,222, well, if we divide that, right, by 2, that's 4,611. A far cry from the average high listed here of 3,765. So, Giants, I really don't know what's going on with your math at this point. But at any rate, our potato chips. we still have 33,000 liters worth of potato chips to go. So let's go ahead and fast forward some more time and see how long it takes to process the same amount of potato chips. So it's sometime between November and December, all of our potatoes were used up. They're now all used up. We have 10 pallets here outside the factory. We have 4,230 liters of potatoes in the factory. So we basically have 2 pallets of potato chips in the factory still left to be put out here for our use. So let's go ahead and sell these. $11,082. $10,839. And 9,267. So the best price was at the small kiosk. 11,082. So if we took that and timed it by 12, well, our profit is a lot more than what I was estimating. Our profit is now $132,984. So if you have supply of sunflower oil, well, it seems to be that your potato chip factory is going to be a pretty good deal. We added 5,000 liters worth of sunflower oil. We have 961 liters left. So for our 1 hectare of potatoes, we used just over 4,000 liters worth of sunflowers and our sunflower oil. And I'm pretty confident that you can get more than that as far as sunflower oil out of 1 hectare's worth of sunflowers. Now, we also have to talk about the cost of the factories here. So your potato processor, well, it's going to cost $360,000. Your sip factory is going to cost $405,000. So you're going to have to factor in your investment of your potato processor, but you're also going to have to factor in the investment to your oil mill. And that's going to be an additional $240,000. So after you've bought those two things, and you have a field for potatoes, and you have a field for sunflowers, well then, and only then, are you really going to be able to make your potato chips. Because I really, really do not suggest that you go and buy sunflower oil from the warehouse, if your map has a warehouse, because it's $7,690 per 1,000 liters, right? You got to buy 5 of those basically. That's going to eat too much into your profits. And there you go, folks. That is basically everything you need to know in order to plant, care for, harvest, and ultimately profit from potatoes. If you've got any questions, let me go ahead and put those down in the comments below. Any thoughts, any comments, any suggestions for future tip and tricks videos, please go ahead and put those down in the comments below as well. And until next time, happy farming.